Hey everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. And today we're going to be doing another example of a narrative. And today's narrative example is going to be about a narcotic overdose. On the dispatch information, I always try to include a few things in the very first sentence. Where I'm coming from, where I'm going to, the reference, and the age and the gender if I have it. In this case, we have Atlantis Fire Station number 1 is dispatched to 123 North Appleton in reference to an approximate 20-year-old male found unconscious and unresponsive. Medic 1 responds code 3 from Atlantis Fire Station 1 with 3 personnel. I always like to mention if we went emergent or non-emergent, and also all the personnel including myself. While en route, dispatch advises that the patient was found at the city park and the reporting party is a passerby that states he is barely breathing. So just from the jump, this sounds a little strange. It's a little bit late at night. I definitely want to get law enforcement on scene. Medic 1 requests law enforcement to respond as well. Dispatch advises sometime later that law enforcement is on scene and the scene is safe. So once the scene is deemed safe, we'll make our entrance. Upon arrival, EMS is directed to the center of the park and the patient is found supine, unconscious with snoring respiration. So basically, I've described to you everything from that moment we got the tone out to the moment I laid eyes on the patient. Next, we're going to go into our chief complaint, which is an unresponsive patient, and I put / narcotic overdose, which is something that we discover later on in the call. With this patient being unconscious and unresponsive, we're not able to get a lot of answers from him, so we don't know allergies, we don't know medication, we don't know past medical history or last oral intake, and the events leading up to. The bystanders state that they were just walking around the park and saw something on the ground, but could not tell if it was a person. They approached it and realized that it was a person that was breathing in an odd way. When the patient did not wake up after calling out to him, the bystanders called 911. So now we know the bystanders did not know the patient at all. They just happened to kind of stumble upon him while out late at the park at night. And that's pretty much all we know. So our history section is very short. Now going into our assessment. This is going to be the crucial part of our narrative, especially in this case when we can't get a lot of history from our patient. We can have our suspicions, but until we've done that full body head to toe, and sometimes even after, we won't find out. So the first thing I always start off with is if the patient is AEIOU times 4, this patient is not alert or oriented to person, place, time, and event. Then I go on to my ABCs. The airway appears to be patent with no obvious obstructions or excessive secretions, but the patient does have snoring respirations. So that could be due to the tongue. A jaw thrust is performed. Remember guys, we don't know if the patient fell or anything like that, so we're not going to manipulate the neck very much. An NPA is placed. Patient appears to be slowly breathing at 6 breaths per minute with an initial SpO2 of 72%. Lung sounds are clear bilaterally. EMS initiates oxygen administration at 15 liters per minute via BVM. Then I go into my circulation. It appears to be intact, but does appear to be poor. No external hemorrhage or obvious trauma is noted to the patient. Weak but regular radial pulses are noted. The patient's skin is noted to be pale and cyanosis is noted to the lips. Pupils are noted to be pinpoint and a complete head-to-toe assessment is performed. It reveals new bruising and old scar tissue to the right and left AC and hands, indicating possible drug use. So basically this patient has track marks. A blood glucose level is taken. It is noted to be 114. The temperature is 97.8. And the initial set of vitals, which I don't typically include in all of my narratives unless there's just something about the vitals that is really bad. My initial set of vitals are a blood pressure of 82/58, a heart rate of 50 beats per minute, an SpO2 of 70% on room air, and a respiratory rate of 6 breaths per minute. So essentially, this patient is hypotensive, bradycardic, hypoxic, and the pupils are pinpoint, which we all know kind of leads us to one conclusion: this patient probably has narcotics on board. And the treatment of this patient. I always start every treatment section with the patient assessment is performed because it is one of the first things that we do. A cervical collar is applied because we don't know if the patient fell. The patient is placed on the gurney and all seatbelts are applied. He is moved into the ambulance for more light and safety concerns. It's the middle of the night and we're in the middle of a city park. Who knows if it's a bad part of town or whatever. In the ambulance, the patient is laying supine. Oxygen administration is initiated at 15 liters per minute via BVM. Initial vitals are taken and are as recorded, and I did put them also up in the assessment area. 2 milligrams of Narcan are administered nasally, 1 milligram per nair. An 18-gauge IV is established to the left forearm, and patency is ensured with a flush of normal saline. No redness, tenderness, or signs of infiltration are noted to the site. This is something I always put with IV access because a lot of things can go wrong if an IV line infiltrates depending on what medication you give through it. A blood draw is also obtained. 200 milliliters of a 500 milliliter bag of normal saline is administered. After Narcan is administered, the patient regains consciousness, vitals improve, and the patient is taken off the BVM and put onto the nasal cannula. And the main things that I like to touch on in the transport section is if we went non-emergent, if we went emergent, if there were any major changes en route, and also what I relay to the hospital and what they order back. So for example, patient is transported non-emergent to Atlantis General Hospital. Patient's condition is monitored, reassessed during transport with improvement noted. The last set of vitals, and the reason that I'm including this last set of vitals is just to show the improvement. Blood pressure of 110/78, a heart rate of 68, an SpO2 of 100% on 4 liters per minute on a nasal cannula, and a respiratory rate of 16. AGH is contacted via radio and advised of the patient's condition, treatment, and our estimated time of arrival. AGH advises no changes in patient's care, and upon arrival, the patient is placed in ER bed 15 and verbal report is given to RN Jessica Smith, and signatures are obtained. I usually like to put where I put the patient, who I left them with, and that we obtained signatures. Then I just say medic 1 is cleaned, restocked, and returned to station number 1. And then I put my name, my employee identification number, and my national registry level. And that concludes my entire narrative. So looking at it as a whole, you'll just take a look. It isn't a really long D chart, but I do include a lot in the assessment section because that is where we really figured out that this patient was suffering from a narcotic overdose. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you have ideas in the future for videos, please let me know. I like to try to get to those. I have a bunch of people asking me for a day in the life of a paramedic, and I'm really going to try and do that for you guys. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Bye.